there's a debate between an 8-game conference schedule, which has been the current format, and going forward with 9, which on one hand makes sense because you've got 16 teams in the league, so you got 15 possible opponents. Just in terms of only playing 8 conference games, there's 7 teams floating out there that you don't play every year, and there's a question in terms of legitimacy of the conference championship when you've got so many teams you don't even play within the conference. But then that has to be weighed against non-conference scheduling, and for those teams like Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, they've got an ACC team rivalry that they play each year, and if you size them down to 3 non-conference games, then it's going to be difficult for them to schedule anyone else legit outside the conference. So where do you stand on 8 or 9 conference games for the Hogs?
This is I don't know why so many non-SEC fans are so concerned about how many conference games are the SEC.
They are.
And I don't understand it. I know everyone else does it. I think all the Power Fives do. Here's my question.
Not the ACC.
Oh, they don't. The ACC doesn't.
They're still at 8.
Why aren't we all over them? You know,
Because
I don't understand it. Why is everyone obsessed with 9 games with the SEC?
Because you they don't send teams to the playoffs or win championships. So nobody cares.
Yeah. I don't think it makes a difference if Georgia plays. I don't know. If someone like Georgia doesn't make a difference. You look at the best years of Alabama. I don't think it makes a difference if they play another conference game. I don't care. This has been one of those topics. I think they will go to 9. I just think everyone outside the SEC is so I don't get it. They're obsessed with this. And
there you go. Argraw, because it's BS.
Okay. Tell me why it's BS.
Okay. This is, I don't completely agree with this, but I understand some of the points. I think this is the claim by other conference fans.
Sure.
Is, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the Big 12 play 9 conference games. Therefore, if you've got a 12-game season and you're playing at least 1 non-conference game against a Power 5, maybe you're playing 2, then if you're in the SEC and you're only playing 8 conference games, that's only 8 Power 5 opponents. So typically, if everyone is scheduling similarly outside the conference, you're playing 1 less Power 5 opponent.
Sure.
Therefore, the argument is that the schedule is easier because it's loaded down with a lot of Tennessee Chattanoogas and Citadels and so forth.
I'm pulling up who did Georgia play this year? Who was their non-conference games?
They played Oregon. That was their big non-conference game.
And so I think
when Georgia Tech, of course, they play every year.
Yeah, I think when they probably scheduled them, I imagine that Oregon was probably pretty good. Yeah, they played Oregon.
Game 1.
Yeah, like you said, they play Georgia Tech every year. That's a rivalry. And then Kent State and Samford.
And so not to cut you off, Ty, before you get to this point, but the initial point that I was making was for Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, and who am I missing? Anyway, 4 teams in the SEC East: Kentucky, Georgia, Florida. Shoot, I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, South Carolina, yes, that they have a rival in the ACC. South Carolina always plays Clemson. We know the other ones. So if you go to 9 conference games, then they are always playing. Let's take South Carolina, for example. They're always playing Clemson. But most fans, and if you look at Georgia's schedule, South Carolina, most years they will go out and they'll play another really good Power 5 team outside the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're putting them in a position where they are playing 11 tough games and they're only getting 1 cream puff.
See, that would be my argument, is that nobody else, maybe the Big Ten, nobody else plays a schedule like the SEC. Nobody.
Sure. There's no question about that.
In Bama, you go back to 2021, they went 12-1. They beat Cincinnati in the first round, lost to Georgia 33-18. They beat top 15 ranked Miami 44-13 to start the year off. And at that time, Miami, I know, I don't remember how that year unfolded. Maybe they weren't as good.
Finished. They went 7-5.
They didn't unfold the way they thought, but the point being is they did schedule Miami, who they still draw 4 and 5 star talent. They had that same year they played an 11th ranked Florida, 12th ranked Ole Miss. They did lose to A&M. They had to play Tennessee, beat the crap out of them. Arkansas was ranked at the time. They beat Arkansas 42 to 35. And this is 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And then crushed Georgia in the SEC championship. Nobody plays a schedule like the SEC. And I know you know that, but just talking to the people who push against this, I don't know that playing 9 conference games makes as big of a difference as a lot of people think that it will. But at the same time, that's also just going to throw them into the higher, when you talk about like preseason AP top 25, you're going to look back and say, oh, well, they played 9 conference games and, maybe Alabama went 8-1, Georgia went 9-0, maybe South Carolina, who I think is actually on the rise. Congrats to them. Maybe they went 7-2. Well, that's going to give them more opportunities to get a higher rank, and you might end up with more teams out of the SEC in the preseason top 25 based on what they did the year before in the SEC, just in conference play alone. I don't know that it shapes out the way that people thinks that it will. I'm not against it. I'm not saying this to say that I'm fully against it. I'm not. I kind of wish there was I don't know how to feel about the NCAA taking over scheduling for the entire. I think in the next 10 to 15 years, the NCAA may not even exist, but there should be a governing body that determines what that should look like, right? Like
absolutely
who you're going to play. And I know it's within the league, but you have all these differences between these other, like you said, ACC and the SEC. They don't play 9 conference games or 9 in-conference games. They just play the 8. Now, I don't know what the Pac does. I think they were playing 9 games maybe. And
they've
then
always played 9. Yeah, they're at 9.
I don't know, like they play 9 and it's not doing them any favors, but maybe that's the point of it. Maybe that's what everyone believes. Well, if we give the SEC 9, they won't be the powerhouse. I severely doubt that. I don't think it does what people thinks that it's going to do. At the same time, I'm not against it. Bring on 9 games. Arkansas' schedule could legitimately be Texas, Oklahoma, LSU. Say what you want about Texas, who I already mentioned. Say what you want about the Mississippi schools, but we know what they're capable of. That's what Arkansas' schedule is going to look like, and you're going to throw a fit because we're not scheduling a 9th SEC team. You're not playing that schedule. Why do you care who we're playing? You're not playing this strength of schedule. Now, I tell you, I think the Big Ten is right on the heels of the SEC. I do respect the Big Ten, but it's still not the SEC. And when you look at first-round talent, when you look at legit NFL talent, what they do in high school recruiting, what they do in the transfer portal, what they do in terms of quality of coaches, there's just no one else but the SEC. That's kind of Nick Saban. That's his line, right? Like, this is the best conference, and we have to play 8 teams that legitimately 5 of them could probably go into the ACC, the PAC out west, the Big 12, and probably be a top 2, top 3 team in those conferences. We got to play 5 of them every year. So I don't know. Again, it's always puzzled me why so many non-SEC fans are obsessed with this topic. Fine, play 9. I just don't think it's going to get you your result that you're looking for.
Well, we're going to hear from them right now because this is getting people stirred up. So here we go. And certainly chime in, Ty, because I'm ready to pounce on some of these these comments because there's validity. There are threads of validity, but there's also very flawed thinking here too. So R. Gross says it keeps an SEC team higher in the rankings by giving them a win when others lose. Okay. So let's do the math here. You got 14 teams in these leagues. Let's not dissect every league. Let's just look at like Big Ten, ACC, SEC of 14 teams. So if you're playing a non-conference opponent, you're playing 14 games against non-conference foes. If you were playing an extra conference game, you're playing each other. So in those 14 non-conference games, what's the SEC going to do? They're probably going to go 12-2, 13-1, depending on what the competition is. Okay. Granted, I understand if they're all playing each other, they're going to go what? 7-7. So there are going to be less wins to the SEC. And to Argraw's point, he thinks that props up and gives an extra win to a number of teams in the SEC who might be 7-5. Suddenly they're 8-4, and maybe they're ranked number 22 in the country. Whatever. Let's also understand that, and this is a bitter pill for everyone to swallow, but they've been swallowing it for at least 15 years now, so you should be used to it. The SEC wins a higher percentage, by far a higher percentage of non-conference games and quality non-conference games. I'm not just talking about going out and beating UT Chattanooga and Colorado State. I'm talking about ranked opponents. It's not even close. The SEC. So the SEC goes out there and takes care of business. If you looked at the quality wins from the SEC last season, it doesn't even come close to the other conferences. The SEC defeated Ohio State, BYU, Oregon, Utah, Purdue, Miami, Cincinnati, Clemson twice. I could keep going. And you size that up against other conferences, and this is every season that the SEC defeats the teams that are really good out of the other conferences. Not every game, but the majority of the games. So there is some validity. The math does say if you go out and schedule an extra cream puff non-conference, you're going to win almost all those games, versus if you play an extra conference game, somebody's got to lose the games. So half of them are won, half of them are lost because you're playing each other. So, yes, maybe the overall record gets slotted up slightly by the SEC.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually to pull that up because I know you're a numbers guy, you're an analytical guy. Arkansas did beat Cincinnati. Now, they did beat BYU as well, but they also lost to Liberty. But Liberty was I would argue, a pretty quality opponent. Not an elite team, not a playoff contender.
I've got them all right here, Ty. I got all the non-conference games right up here.
You're better at that than I am, because I have this thing where I just move ahead and I just put so much behind me. But yeah, they beat the team that just went to the playoffs the year before, Cincinnati. They opened up in Fayetteville against Cincy, took care of business. Cincy was able to kind of make it a game there towards the end. But that doesn't surprise me that the SEC. So I don't know the point for them to go to 9 other than everyone else is doing it. Like, really, I just don't care enough. I am of the mindset of, if you want 9, then play 9. But if that's the case, then everyone across the board should play 9. That includes the ACC and the SEC. And I don't have a problem with that. But and like you just stated, the SEC still does well against whoever you put in front of them. If it's one of the top 4, top 5 teams in the league, they typically could go to your conference and beat your conference. Now, maybe not always. Again, I'm going to yield to the Big Ten. Maybe not always in the Big Ten, but they could certainly do it in the Big 12, the Pac, in the ACC. And maybe there's times where I think the second or third best team in the SEC probably could go into the Big Ten and tear it up and do just fine. But again, these other conferences, including the Big Ten, do not play the schedules that these SEC teams are playing. So that would be my only argument against it. But other than that, I'm okay with the SEC playing 9 games.
Ty, I make the statement at the end of each season, and I say, I wish it would be good for my channel. It would be good for debate. I wish we could have a debate about this. I would love to have a debate and say, you know what? I have no idea which conference is the best. Let's go to the numbers and let's break it down, because I got to do like a 12-part series on this to get to the bottom. No, it's not debatable. It's not debatable. But I still go through the process of breaking down all the non-conference results every season. And I post a video, ACC, what did they do against everyone else? SEC. And the SEC has a clear divide between them and the rest of the college football in regards to defeating quality opponents, and best winning percentage against Power 5 teams, best winning percentage against ranked teams. They just do.
And I'm gonna be real, because you and I are both just college football fans. I would love it if the SEC wasn't so far ahead of everybody. I would love it if them in the Big Ten, if it was a little bit more even across the board. I really would, because I like parity in college football. I sit here and told you on your show, I don't think TCU wins, but I'm going to root for them, just because that would be anarchy if TCU were able to win the national title. It'd be crazy. It would maybe kind of help reset things a little bit, at least in terms of the optics of the playoff. And of course, we know the playoffs are getting an expansion anyways, which I'm all for. But I wish Alabama and Georgia weren't 10 miles ahead of everybody. Now with the transfer portal, it's helping to close the gap in some cases. Not everywhere, but in some cases. I mean, you look at the impact that it's having on baseball and basketball, it's extraordinary. But in football, it's a little less than those two sports. But I'm all for. I want parity in college football. I wouldn't mind at all to see, Michigan win the whole thing, maybe beating, I don't know, Oklahoma State in the national title game. That would be fun for me. That would be entertaining. Like a lot of fans, I'm so tired of knowing that, Clemson, who did eventually kind of die down, but I was getting tired of Clemson, right? But you still had, even though they kind of died down, you still have Alabama in the conversation every year. Georgia's going to be in the conversation every year. Ohio State's going to be in the conversation every year. We got TCU to kind of break through there, and we thought, well, here we go. You had Washington several years ago. I think they actually went to back-to-back, if I remember right. But
no, just one.
Did they not? I thought they had 2.
16.
Okay. All right. For some reason, I thought they got in twice with Peterson as the Boise State coach.
Peterson.
Yep. Yeah. For some reason, I thought he got them there twice. But I want more parity.
Team to make a playoff.
Oh yeah. And don't get me started on them. They're not playing enough games, Mark. That's their problem. They're not playing enough conference games. That's the problem here. Or maybe they need to schedule less in their case. But I like more parity in college football, and I hope that with the expansion, I think we are going to see a little bit more of that. Maybe that'll help to kind of quieten people who are upset about how many games each conference is playing. Maybe not. Maybe it'll put in more teams in the SEC, or it'll have the opposite effect. I don't know. But I do think eventually the SEC is going to go to 9 games. And I'm all for the playoff expansion. I don't know that 12 is enough. That's a conversation that you and I have yet to have, is where you're at on the playoff expansion. If you think 12 is enough, you think that ought to go to 16.
Well, before we get to that, I will say, to close out what we're talking about concerning what happened last season and the SEC's gap over everybody else, that, we know it's obvious that the Big Ten has the resources. They're the only conference that has the resources, and with bringing in USC in particular, that they can keep within distance of the SEC. Last season, if this would have happened, I still would have thought that the SEC was the best conference, but this would have created a great debate. If Michigan would have beaten TCU, which of course it went down to the wire, it's a great game, but they lost. And if Ohio State would have made that kick against Georgia, which of course they didn't, but they had the ball on the kicker's foot to win the game, Ohio State, they would have beaten TCU to win the national championship.
Oh, yeah. I think so.
But if it would have been an all Big Ten national championship, now you're just talking about the very top of the league, but that's what people care about. That would have been, now we would have been in a position all off season to have a great debate, but it didn't quite happen. So here we are. Georgia's the national champion again. And what Art Graw is saying right here, just to address this really quick, this is, again, I appreciate your comment, Art Graw, but it's flawed, because you say Iowa plays Iowa State every year. Keeping a Power 5 team on the schedule is not exclusive to the SEC. I understand that, but you know what? Iowa does not schedule anybody else. South Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky doesn't. Kentucky does what Iowa does. They schedule Louisville. They got the Louisville game. They schedule 3 cream puffs. Other than that, they're playing the MAC and they're playing Western Kentucky. That's what they do. But the other schools, Florida doesn't just say, oh, we've got Florida State every year. No, they schedule Utah. They're going to Utah again this year. Iowa doesn't do that. No, they don't schedule anybody else. So they don't make that comparison.
I think Art Graw is just very, he's got an obsession with the SEC.
And I get it. If you do,
I do too.
Just as we did, you can say that there are artificial wins for the SEC. I get that point. You're right. There are a handful of them.